These are Europe's homegrown companies, built from scratch in the past 50 years, now worth over $10 billion. It doesn't look too bad, does it? Well, now look at these from the US and see the relation. The difference is simply staggering. You could fit all of Europe's innovation inside of Microsoft and still have some room left. It is painful, but there's hope. The EU is working on a massive new initiative to revolutionize the entire ecosystem in which startups and companies operate, the so-called 28th legal regime. A change that could finally help Europe compete with the big players. You know, the US and China. But before we get into that, let's look at how things work today. Meet Amy, a 26-year-old engineer from Belgium, and Tomas, her university friend from Poland. Together, they've built something special, an AI model that's cheaper and more transparent than anything out there. Now they're ready to launch their company right here in Europe. But that's when the real roller coaster, a very expensive roller coaster, truly begins. Amy sets up the company in Belgium as a BV, and Tomas moves there too. But it's not exactly smooth sailing. From the very start of their journey, they need a lawyer, a notary, and a full 2-year financial plan. All the paperwork's in Dutch. Not great for Tomas, but they manage. A few €1,000 and 6 weeks later, they finally get their Belgian company number. Congrats, Amy and Tomas. You've survived Belgian bureaucracy. So far, Amy and Tomas have been running on savings, but with business booming, it's time to raise their first round of funding, €1 million. And that's when they hit the next wall. You see, Belgium is a small country, which also means a very small pool of investors. And after pitching to everyone in Brussels, Tomas heads to Slush in Helsinki, one of Europe's biggest startup conferences, to try his luck with international investors. But he keeps running into the same problem. EU investors hesitate, and international investors say no altogether. It's not because they don't like the idea. They just don't want to get tangled up in Belgian bureaucracy and Belgian corporate law. Each country has its hidden gotchas, different tax rules, investor protections, and paperwork rituals. I mean, just imagine you invest in a Belgian startup, and years later, you found out that a small mistake made your investment invalid. Or worse, made you personally liable. Maybe you even have to file taxes in Belgium, without ever earning a cent there. It's not that any of this happens often, but the uncertainty is enough to scare off most investors. The international investors Tomas meets in Helsinki know the rules and feel comfortable investing in startups from Germany, France, the UK, and obviously the US, but not across all 27 EU countries. So Tomas returns to Brussels, very disappointed. But their idea is just too good to stop there. While Tomas was away, Emmy found a Belgian angel investor, and the show goes on. Time to expand. And to attract top talent, Amy and Tomas want to offer stock options, the right to buy shares later at a low price. If the company takes off, those shares can be worth a lot. Simple idea, right? Well, not here in Europe. In Belgium, employees can be taxed the moment they receive stock options, even if they can't sell them yet. It's what they call a dry tax. So imagine telling a new hire, you might owe taxes before your shares are worth anything. Most people would just say, no thanks. Still, Amy and Tomas somehow managed to find some talent, especially in Poland, where they open a new office. But that means 2 different compensation plans, one Belgian and one Polish. But the real trouble comes 6 months later, when a Polish engineer wants to move to Brussels. His stock option plan doesn't transfer easily, which means more paperwork, more legal fees, and more headaches. Not good for Amy and Tomas and their new company. So, I think you're starting to get the idea here. Across Europe, entrepreneurs face costly and inconsistent registration processes, country-specific investment contracts that scare off international investors, and fragmented, unfavorable stock option plans that make it harder to attract top talent. In other words, Europe's making it extra hard for them to build and grow. But it really doesn't have to be this way. In the US, startups register just once, use one standard contract for investors, and offer super simple stock options that are taxed only when employees sell. The result? The numbers are simply staggering. All 6 US companies worth over $2 trillion were founded in the last 50 years. In Europe, not a single one. Actually, there is not a single company over even $1 trillion. American startups from the same period are worth 70 times more than their European counterparts. And 93% of EU founders say they'd rather incorporate in the US than here in Europe. Those are some massive blows to Europe's startup scene. Alright, this has all sounded pretty grim so far, but there is actually some good news. Great news, in fact. The European Union actually has a plan to start fixing this mess, the 28th regime. And honestly, it's a pretty smart idea. Think of it as a 28th member state, a kind of virtual country that sits on top of the existing ones, offering one single set of rules for company registration, investment, and reporting. Because, let's be honest here, harmonizing corporate law across 27 countries isn't happening anytime soon. And momentum is building. Friedrich Merz, Emmanuel Macron, and Ursula von der Leyen have all publicly backed the idea of a truly pan-European startup legal entity. But there's also some bad news. Current drafts from both the European Parliament and the Commission propose doing this through a directive. And that would mean 27 different national versions of the 28th regime, which completely defeats the whole point of having it in the first place. What really needs to happen is for this to be done through a regulation, one that applies identically across the EU by default. And that's where EU Inc. comes in. Over 18,000 European founders, CEOs, and investors have joined forces to push the EU to finally get this right. People like Arthur Mensch of Mistral, Tavad Hinrichs of Wise, and Martin Mignon of Index, and many, many more. All of them are urging EU policymakers to deliver a real pan-European legal framework, a 28th regime with one single set of rules. And at the heart of that proposal is EU Inc.
So the idea of EU Inc. is essentially to create a standard legal entity that's the same in every country within the European Union, hopefully within Europe. Because you standardize corporate law so that people can fully trust what they're getting into. There's no unknown unknowns.
Okay, sounds a bit complicated, right? So let's go back to Amy and Tomas in Belgium to see how this could actually work. To start off, Amy wouldn't need to register her company in Belgium, and then again in Poland. Instead, she would register using the EU registry, a fully online, API-first, English-first, digital system run by an EU authority. Everything will be done online. No notaries, no paper, no in-person visits. The process would follow the once-only principle, meaning that once Amy's company is registered, it's recognized everywhere in the EU. She and her investors could identify themselves before any authority, without having to register again. And the whole process will be fast and cheap. Under 100 euros to incorporate, and completed in just 24 hours. This would be a massive win for Amy, saving both time and money. And raising funds would also get a lot easier. At Slush in Helsinki, Tomas wouldn't have to watch investors walk away because of Belgium's complicated corporate law, unknown and too risky for them. Instead, every EU Inc. would rely on a standard document, the EU FAST. It's simple, familiar, and fast. Investors can sign and fund startups instantly. And because it works across all 27 countries, they actually learn it, trust it, and most importantly, use it. No extra lawyers, no nasty surprises. And this means Tomas finally gets the investment he and Amy need. The same would go for stock options. Under EU Inc., Amy would only need one pan-European plan, the EU-ESOP, letting her reward employees with company shares no matter where in the EU they work. Everyone would follow the same basic rules, when shares can be bought and when they are taxed. For example, employees would only be taxed when they actually sell their shares, not before. So company success wouldn't risk bankrupting them. It would finally put Europe on equal footing with the US, and let Amy hire the best talent from anywhere. It goes without saying, Amy and all of her employees are delighted. But what about the tricky stuff, like taxes and employment law, which differ hugely across EU countries? Under EU Inc., none of that changes. It doesn't touch local taxes or labor rules, for a very simple reason. No country is giving up control over those anytime soon. So as Amy and Tomas run their company from Belgium, things like taxes, holidays, and social security follow Belgian law, and their Polish team in Warsaw pays taxes and follows labor rules under the Polish law. As you can see, EU Inc. makes life so much easier for Amy and Tomas, letting them spend their time and money on actually growing their business, not on bureaucracy and lawyers.
We need to be competitive with America. And this is, from our point of view, this is table stakes. This is basic infrastructure. Because right now what's happening is we don't use European scale. If you are in Netherlands, if you are in Lithuania, you're not competing as Europe against China or America. You're competing as the Netherlands against China and America. And in a time of giants, only European scale is actually what makes us competitive. And the whole idea of EU Inc. is to create that scale, to create that standard, and through that make it actually possible for our best founders to succeed on global scale.
This is what I think. I'll be honest, I love the idea of the 28th regime and building our very own EU Inc. I genuinely think this might be Europe's best shot at catching up with the United States and China. Just imagine the potential this has. On a business level, our startups could finally focus on building their products, not drowning in paperwork. They'd save money on bureaucracy, attract more investment, and grow faster. Right now, less than 18% of early-stage investments in Europe are cross-border, and that needs to change. And then there's the talent. My God, Europe is overflowing with incredible engineers and innovators, and it honestly pains me to see so many of them jet off to San Francisco to build the next Google or Tesla. A system like this, with stock options that actually rival the US, could finally give them a reason to stay here, to build Europe's future in Europe. And I love that. But the real magic is in the long game. If enough companies start operating under the 28th regime, incorporating the suggestions from EU Inc., it could gradually transform the entire EU single market for business, slowly making the messy patchwork of national rules obsolete. Super ambitious? Absolutely. But it could also be the beginning of something big. A genuine European breakthrough.
So if you want to support EU Inc., you can do two things. Number one is you can go to the website, the link is right below, and sign a proposal. And number two is if you have any very influential people in your network, like politicians or people who run massive companies, make them supportive of that idea of a standard for European investments in Europe.
The EU Made Simple team has signed it, and we would love for you to do the same. And keep an eye out. The European Commission is expected to publish its official proposal by early 2026. So if you want to stay updated on how the 28th regime might just reshape Europe's future, make sure to subscribe. Thank you so much for watching. And this video is created in collaboration with Index, a global VC firm that has backed major European startups like Revolut, Remote, Alan, Mistral, and Supercell. And if you want to support us further, consider joining us on Patreon. Thank you to our presidents, Jan Schauke, Christian Peter, HGVD, Daniel Unite Europe, Stefan, and Kiki Luxen.